Champions of the Force was released in 1994 and was written once again by Kevin J. Anderson and is the third installment in the Jedi Academy Trilogy. It takes place directly after the events of the previous novel, as Kip Duron is going throughout the galaxy trying to destroy the Empire with the use of the weapon, the Sun Crusher, while he is under the influence of the villainous spirit Exar Kun, the ancient Sith Lord. While this is going on, Luke is also in his own battle against Exar Kun as he is put into a sort of Jedi trance, a sleep that he cannot awake from. While that's going on, Han Solo sets out on a journey to try to find Kip and turn him to the light side. While this is also going on, there is an attempt by the Empire to kidnap the third Solo child, Anakin Solo, while Dala decides to take matters into her own hands and uses a prototype of the Death Star to wreak havoc on the galaxy. If that feels like an overstuffed plot, it definitely is. The third book in this trilogy definitely has the backload of having the most going on at any given time. Because the second book in this trilogy had the least amount of stuff going on, this had a lot of stuff to get through. We have the kidnapping of Anakin Solo. We have to deal with the plot line with Exar Kun and Kip Duron. We also had to deal with Dala and make it all tied together in the end. And I think that is the biggest hurdle that this book has to overcome, and that Kevin J. Anderson himself had to overcome. And whether he succeeds or not will definitely be up to you. But for the most part, I think he just kind of drags across the finish line with this one. And in fact, I will say, I enjoyed this book a lot more than the previous book, but I cannot deny that it still has many of the problems that were in the previous two books. There's a lot of times where just a little bit too much is going on all at once. The structure of the book is rather wonky. It just doesn't fit into that three-act structure as well as I would like it to, and it can be rather off-putting. However, there is a lot less meandering in this book. A lot of the stuff going on matters for the most part. There's still some plot lines here and there that I don't think really matter, that don't need to be there, such as the stuff with Kwisatz, with Wedge, and also Leia, once again, really doesn't have that much to do. But before we get into some of my negatives, which I've already addressed, let's get into a lot of my positives with this book. First off, I want to mention that I really love the idea that Han Solo himself is going out to save Kip Duron, to turn him back to the light side. I think that is really well done here in this book, because we spent a lot of time in the first book and some in the second book developing these two's relationship. There is definitely a father-son relationship here that I think really lands really well, and I think it works for the beginning of this story and why it is Han that should be going out to save Kip. It also reminded me a lot of Han going out to save Kylo Ren in The Force Awakens, which was a neat little connection that I saw. I also like seeing more of Exar Kun in this book, specifically when he is talking with Luke. I like their conversations a lot as Luke is kind of in this sleep after his kind of confrontation with Kip Duron. And it's very well written. It's very interesting. It gets you just asking a lot of questions about the Sith that, somebody really wouldn't know at this point in time, because the Sith were really new in terms of the expanded universe at this time. And I really like that stuff a lot. I also liked how Kip's turn to the light side was handled. I thought it was believable in a way and really kind of cathartic for that character. I really, felt something when I felt that, yes, he finally sees the light and he is turned from the darkness. And I thought that was very well done, especially seeing the vision of his brother who dies at the beginning of this book kind of more or less because of Kip Duron's actions. And I think that is really well done. And I like how um, after the defeat of Exar Kun, that Luke really is still trying to help Kip along because he sees potential in him to be the best of the Jedi, and he is trying to help him prove himself. And that stuff is really good. I also like a little bit more of the goofier stuff in the book, such as the fact that we have yet another earth-shattering, destroying weapon in the prototype Death Star. It's just another excuse to have another super weapon in this story. It's honestly not needed, but it is a lot of fun. And I think a lot of the action at the very end of this book is really fun, enjoyable Star Warsy stuff that it's fun to read. And that's my biggest compliment that I can say for this book, despite all of its flaws, and there are many in this book, probably more than the previous books. It is constantly entertaining. There is always something going on. There's always a fun little action beat. There's fun character moments. And it is kind of just the ultimate Star Wars fan book in that regard. I think that's what makes it so entertaining. But I also like how the characters are handled in this book. I also really like how they handle Mon Mothma getting ill in this book. In the previous book, they really didn't dwell on it that much, but really, having characters interacting with her as she's more or less on her deathbed is really haunting stuff. And seeing Leia eventually get this position of power by being the leader of the Republic by the end of the book is really cool, I think, and really sets up some interesting dynamics that could be really cool to explore following in, the next several books. But I thought that stuff was really neat. It was just a fun, enjoyable read that I'm so glad that this book didn't completely fall on its face, which I was really afraid it would after my kind of initial disappointment of the second book in the trilogy. Now, getting into my negatives, I will say one of my biggest criticisms of the book and kind of this entire trilogy is the structure of the story itself. This book in particular just really doesn't follow the three-act structure in a way that works. There's a lot of things that are just not that satisfying to me. The first half of the book kind of deals with ending the Exar Kun kind of plot line with Exar Kun possessing Kip and Kip turning to the dark side. All that is done in roughly the first half of the book. And it's really disappointing because that stuff was set up in the first book. It happened in the second book and then is just kind of done away with by the middle of the book. And then the rest of the book is dealing with the Empire and dealing with Dala and dealing with the second, or the prototype Death Star. And it just kind of fell flat for me, even though I enjoyed it a lot. I wish that this storyline had continued on farther. I wish that there was more Exar Kun and it just wasn't pushed to the side to make way for more Empire stuff, because it felt like the main core of this entire trilogy was about Kip, and about Kip's struggle with the dark side. And it very much still is that by the end of this book. But I think that the Exar Kun stuff was the most interesting stuff, and it feels kind of like the main plot ends halfway through, and then the rest of it is just the rest of the plot. The least interesting stuff, which is kind of Dala and the Empire and all that, that's just the least interesting stuff to me. When it goes into more of the mythology of Star Wars, I find it a whole lot more interesting. I also found that the whole idea that Kip was being possessed, I feel like it's just an excuse to say that he's not completely a bad character. He was just possessed. Yes, he killed millions and billions of people, but he was possessed. And I think Kevin J. Anderson is trying to make that excuse to still make Kip a compelling character, or, the good guy. But from what I've heard from stuff that happens in like iJedi, it's more or less like Kip was kind of doing this on his own and not exactly being possessed. But for this book, he's supposed to be possessed, and I thought that was a little disappointing. I also found a lot of the other plot lines kind of pointless. I really liked seeing Mara Jade brought back into this trilogy after being in the Thrawn trilogy, but I found it so weird that Kevin J. Anderson tries to set up a sort of romance with Lando and her, and it just doesn't work for me because to me, Timothy Zahn set up so well that there was kind of this relationship brewing between Luke and Mara Jade, not Lando. And it's just really weird to me. I think Kevin J. Anderson, more or less, my friend and I were talking about this, was Kevin J. Anderson just kind of writes a whole bunch of names on a board and probably does a lot of connecting dots to be like, yes, connect this character to this character. This character will be with this character. And that's how I feel like he structures his stories. And it is very odd, but still, at the end of the day, with all its problems, for one, I found it a lot more entertaining than the previous book. It may have a little bit more problems in it, but I think it's overall more entertaining. It's got a lot more fun Star Warsy things about it. The structure can be wonky at times, but I think the character moments that land really do land, and in the end, it ended on a satisfying note that made me excited to continue the Star Wars Legends stuff, because I'm just really excited and interested to see how this story continues after this. So anyway, guys, with all that said, I'm gonna give Champions of the Force a 7 out of 10. I would definitely recommend this book if you are a Star Wars fan, and I would recommend this entire trilogy just because it's a lot of fun Star Warsy things, but do be warned that it does have some structural problems. It has some really goofy things here and there. It meanders a bit, but I think the character stuff is really good. The stuff with Luke, the stuff with Han, and the stuff with Kip Duron, who is really the heart and soul of this trilogy. But anyway, guys, I want to thank you for watching this review. I hope you enjoyed it. Next time, I will be reviewing The Crystal Star, which is considered to be the worst Star Wars book ever written. I'm excited to get into that and see my thoughts on that. But before I do that, I might be doing a few comic book reviews of some of the Dark Horse comics that came out around this time as well. So look forward to those coming soon. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you guys in the next review.